If you want to support independent content like this show, the PlayStation Podcast Sacred Symbols, the Retro Podcast Knockback, and more, and get perks for doing so, please consider subscribing to Colin's Last Stand on Patreon at patreon.com/Colin's Last Stand. Your support is essential. Thank you. The Nintendo DS was an amazing handheld with an exceptional library, but if I had to pick out only a few of my favorite games or series that called that device home, my list would absolutely include Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney and its two follow-ups, Justice for All and Trials and Tribulations. In Japan, players were actually first introduced to Ace Attorney on the Game Boy Advance, where the three crime-themed adventures launched in 2001, 2002, and 2004, respectively. It wasn't until 2005 that we first glimpsed Phoenix Wright on Western hardware, and thankfully it didn't take long for these unusual games to take root outside of Japan. My introduction to Phoenix Wright came by way of writing the IGN strategy guides for them, a process that more often than not ruined a game for me. When I still liked the title after going through the process of literally cataloging its contents, that said something to me. When I still loved the game after going through that process, well, I paid really close attention to that. The Phoenix Wright Trilogy remained in my high esteem long after I beat the individual games and put them back on the shelf, and with their recent updated arrival on modern hardware all these years later, well, I couldn't have been more excited to jump in again. For the uninitiated, Phoenix Wright is a fictional attorney, and as the game name suggests, he's the star of the trilogy in question. Wright is an inexperienced lawyer living in a strange version of a Western US-like country, but with an unrecognizable legal system. There are no juries here. Instead, everything runs through a judge no matter what, in this case, more often than not, an older, bald gentleman with an impressive beard. And trials happen really quickly, often with reckless abandon that has no real consideration for the truth, or for evidence, or even for due process. Then again, I'm making it sound more dystopian and stranger than it really is. In context, everything plays out in an almost cartoonish and comedic atmosphere, with over-the-top characters, unlikely situations, and classic whodunit chicanery. It reminds me a lot of Danganronpa actually, melding the not even remotely believable with nonetheless serious situations and repercussions. I suppose it's no surprise that I love both franchises. The Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy is a compilation of the GBA/DS trilogy, but with major graphical upgrades and some other tweaks. The original games ran on old, technologically limited handheld hardware, but thankfully these aren't ports. Instead, this is a massive upgrade, making these games look entirely modern while still keeping their original spirit intact. On DS, we played the game over two screens using a stylus, and admittedly, Phoenix Wright makes the most sense there simply because of the dual screen approach. But I was pleasantly surprised with the refreshed trilogy's interface, segued seamlessly to controller-based, TV-based hardware. This isn't the first time Phoenix Wright has been on console, of course. The games were quietly released on Wii back in the day, but it's the first time we've ever been tasked with playing the games using a traditional controller, and I'm pleased to report that the results are very positive. Playing the games is straightforward enough. A majority of your experience will be spent reading dialogue while making choices about what to ask next, or where to go, or whatever else. All of this is done in text menus, though you'll occasionally get the opportunity to examine your surroundings in a more thorough way. The Phoenix Wright games are presented episodically with multiple episodes per game, each one unfolding in largely the same manner. Multiple days of investigative work and multiple days of courtroom proceedings, all intertwined. As Phoenix Wright is a defense attorney, you're typically trying to get people exonerated from various murders, and the odds always seem stacked against you until they aren't. There's nothing mind-bending here, but the writing can be exceptionally clever and funny, and I really love how the game threads the procedural versus serial needle here. Each episode in each game is its own self-contained story that also usually furthers the Phoenix Wright universe's lore, characters, and relationships. While you could theoretically play them out of order, you ultimately won't, because they have to be unlocked by beating the last, one after another. All of this means that the games don't need to be played with urgency, and let's face it, that's kind of becoming a bit of a problem. Games as a service require time and attention, so do the biggest single-player games, at least if you want to be part of the vaunted conversation. The point is, the Ace Attorney trilogy will fit so well for so many of you because these games can be played slowly, deliberately, and at your own pace. There's no classic gameplay here to master at all. It's not like Sekiro where if you stop playing for a week or two, you've totally forgotten how to play at all. It's a game that takes place almost entirely in menus, that requires a ton of reading, and that's completely linear. Even when you feel like you might have some control over the course of the story, you really don't. You're just seeing it through to its conclusion by, well, playing it. It's everything some gamers hate, but things that I really feel more gamers should choose to embrace. Not always, but sometimes. It's different, it's clever, and it's really charming. And hey, Phoenix Wright is pretty damn influential too, especially when you look at the landscape around when it was made and the influx of similar games, not only in theme, but more so in presentation, we've gotten in the nearly 2 decades since. The reality is, investigating crime scenes, scouring for evidence, interviewing witnesses, culprits, and victims, and dancing with the prosecution in court is a lot of fun in Phoenix Wright, even if you're only driving from point A to point B. There are ways to lose per se. You can present the wrong evidence or ask the wrong question at the wrong time or whatever else, but you can easily save your game around all of this, and since nothing in the game takes place in real time, you're really not up against anything at all here. That might be a turnoff for some of you, but I find experiences like this not only refreshing, but quite necessary as I navigate the more demanding, the more difficult, and the more time-consuming genres I typically dwell in. The shooters, action games, side-scrollers, and RPGs I love so much. Adventure games and visual novels like this offer me a nice respite, and I think the same could be true for you too. If I do have one criticism, however, it's that Capcom didn't put more of their trademark love into this collection. Similar to the Onimusha re-release from earlier this year, Capcom didn't strap the Phoenix Wright Trilogy with anything above and beyond the games themselves that fans might enjoy. There's no concept art or soundtrack mode or anything else to unlock. With the magic Capcom worked with the likes of the Mega Man and Mega Man X collections, we know they have it in them to do it right, and I wish they went the extra mile here, because I would have loved to have gotten a behind-the-scenes look at the series. Still, one can't really complain about value here either. Between the 3 games in this trilogy, you're looking at perhaps 40 or 50 hours of murder cases to get through. Like I said, these aren't games to necessarily be consumed quickly. Rather, by taking one case every now and again, you can stretch out the experience, just like I've been doing. I've made my way through almost the entire first game, but I barely scratched the surface in the second and third. I want to savor it, and I hope you choose to savor it too.